Hi, my name is Kate Hildebrandt. This is all new technology for me, so here we go. I'm an instructor with the School of Environment and Sustainability at Royal Roads University, and I've been teaching professional writing and communication skills to environmental science students for about 5 years. I teach adult learners, mostly 20-something Canadian. Some are older, some are international. There can be vast differences in literacy and levels of understanding within each cohort. So it can be a bit of a surprise. Sometimes there are published writers in the class, and often there are students who are really struggling to learn how to read and write English. So it's always interesting. The strategy that I've chosen is called Understanding Yourself as a Learner. That is the name of this assessment tool that I've been using, and I use it to help students identify their learning styles. I follow the VARC model, visual, oral, reading and writing, kinesthetic learning styles, and explain some learning theory, how VARC came about, and how it can help students really get clear on their best way of bringing in new information. So after a short lecture with slides, I respond to a few questions from students and distribute a 4-page handout, and then ask them to read it and review and self-assess, and then write me a letter explaining their learning style. I also ask them to introduce themselves and explain, in a few sentences, some strengths and weaknesses they have found in their own writing and communication skills. And I keep the directions for the letter posted overhead on a screen, so it remains a point of reference. Students have 1.5 hours to complete this assignment, which includes the reading and the handwritten letter, and that I ask them to keep their letter to 1 page. The assessment is done in the last half of the class because some students take longer than others, and those that complete can leave. The classroom assessment technique that best describes this informal assessment of mine is category 15, approximate analogies. This was great learning for me. I really enjoyed summarizing my teaching goals inventory down to 17, what I call, essential skills. And they fall across 3 major learning clusters, which is high order thinking skills at the top, coming in at 29.4%, basic academic skills at 23.5%, and work and career prep skills at 17.3%. So this was very interesting for me. The principles that drive the strategy, I use the same questions that the authors of the textbook Classroom Assessment Techniques use to define their techniques, and it met the criteria very well. So the principles that drive these goals are, this tool is that it is context sensitive. I strive to accommodate all learning styles in my class, and how students can improve one's writing is really all about improving one's thinking. Number 2, the tool is flexible, yes, and students from a broad range of backgrounds can use the tool. It's likely to make a difference to the student. I've had many students say they've never, ever come across learning style theory before, and they found it illuminating. Many of them a bit life-altering. Others are really familiar but still appreciate the whole idea of being able to communicate to me their preferred learning style. So building a good relationship right at the start. Is it mutually beneficial? Absolutely. This tool helps me and it helps the students. It's sort of like we immediately bridge an important, I don't know, gap is the right word, but we communicate really effectively through this exercise. They can be as creative as they want. They get to synthesize and integrate information and ideas right off the top. They learn about theory and strategies. I'm hoping it engages them to learn more. They get to talk about themselves in a professional context, and just I think the whole thing does add a capacity to encourage them to think for themselves. And meanwhile, I get raw data out of this whole thing, and I get to incorporate it into my next lesson. So yes, it's easy to administer. It takes less than 20 minutes from my time to put this together and in the class, and then they take an hour and a half to do the work. It's easy for them to respond to. Feedback is easy for me to organize and analyze. And yeah, it takes a few hours of my time to build a chart, but I also build a personal chart that I don't show to anyone. That is my reference for when it comes time for grading and feedback. So even if we're on like assignment 3 or 4, 8, 9, 10 weeks in, I can go back and remember who that student was and where they were at when they first began. And I just think that's so valuable to have. And educationally valid, I think it's hugely valid. If it helps a student realize they have a unique learning style, if it helps me to help them be a more effective communicator, yeah, there's a lot of doors are opened. So why did I choose this tool? What were the advantages? And I'm coming at this whole thing looking at how I can create an environment for higher learning and higher skill development. So the tool opens the door for me to get into learning theory and explaining why they were first of all, how they impact teaching, how they define my goals and the learning outcomes, and I get to show this alignment of how many groups and teams are working for them and thinking about their learning and how this tool interrelates to that. How do I use it with the students? I used to do a class discussion, but that got a little too emotional, and a lot of people withheld, didn't speak up and talk about how they felt about writing. A lot of students hold a lot of inner shame around this skill set. And so I thought, okay, let's come up with a private confidential technique. It's what I'm using now. And then I can also speak in general terms when I provide feedback so that it's still private and confidential, but they're still getting good information out of it, such as, the shared knowledge that other people hate writing and other people think they're terrible at writing and find it painful and can't get started. And we look at all of these really important and relevant issues that are barriers to learning how to be a better writer and communicator. I went through them myself. I understand them intimately. So what information do I get from this strategy? Well, I'll summarize by saying that I learn a lot from handwriting. It tells a story in and of itself about personality and creativity, and penmanship can reveal, a sense of order or perfection. Some are messy and scratch stuff out and draw arrows and little illustrations. I mean, you can't get that kind of story through a digital file. Sometimes I spot weak spots with grammar, sentence structure, writing, where to start, all that stuff. I learn what they think of themselves as writers, which is sometimes positive, but often not. And some get down on themselves about their writing and don't even realize that they're really quite competent. I hear the voices in their writing, their tone. It reveals whether they're open or closed to learning and to, keeping a positive attitude. Some voices are authentic and some adopt a persona. Some are funny, self-deprecating, and some are grateful and excited, and some are negative and frustrated. So you've got these writers that write reams but make no points. You've got writers that don't have a technique, don't know how to frame and summarize. You've got writers who are stuck trying to determine where to start. And then you've got some that just rush through like they're working towards a finish line in a race. I don't get that. Oh well. This tool also reveals, I think they rush because they want to get it over with. This tool also reveals how they want to learn and what they want to learn, and that they get to tell me and guide me. And that is so valuable. And, we're on a sort of equal footing. So how will I use this information going forward? Well, I think that I've done a great job in developing a good tool, but I let it fall flat, and that I don't return to this tool later on in the course. I think I can use it as a way to chart their progress and their learning, and to constantly refer back, remind them of the work they've done and the territory they've covered. And I also think I should include my own assessment in the tool so that I keep maintaining that level playing field. I also realize I need to do more research on the VARC model because it's evolving, and that we're now moving into the world of sequential and global learning with the mass movement of people all over this planet. Indigenous learning, laws are changing, policies are changing, attitudes are changing around Indigenous learning, and I would like to incorporate these kind of new ideas into this tool. Mostly, I think, though, I really want to look at the individualized element of self-assessment with a tool like this, and how I think at the end of the course I can remind a student from where they first started and how they've grown in those 10 weeks. And so I think there's a way to pluralize. I'm lifting this language from the VARC website, and I love it. I want to explore ways to pluralize my teaching method to include as many intelligences as possible. And I'm referring to Gardner's multiple intelligences. This is all new learning for me. I love it because I've never thought about this. But I want to continue on where I've been going with linguistic intelligence and interpersonal intelligence, and add to it intrapersonal intelligence and naturalist intelligence, because they're environmental science students. And so subject matter is appropriate, especially when it comes to how human development is impacted by our environment. So there you go. That's where I'm at with this project, with this assignment. I've really, really enjoyed it, and I love this learning. Thank you very much.